Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Eye on the Tigers with the No Network. I am Bryce with the Off the Dome Sports Podcast.
And I'm Byron with the Off the Dome Sports Podcast.
And today we're going to be covering a little bit of LSU news that came out last week with the leaving of Mike Denbrock as the offensive coordinator of the LSU Tigers. So today we're going to be talking about some potential candidates who could take his spot, what we're looking at in the immediate future, and then what we could be looking at maybe, some days down the road. So first of all, we have to cover Mike Denbrock leaving, of course, going to Notre Dame, going back to his home. Only about 2 hours away from Notre Dame is where he's from. He's been at Notre Dame in the past. Brian Kelly brought him in for a reason, but he's going back to South Bend. So now with Denbrock leaving, we have an open spot. We are in the bowl game, the Rely Quest Bowl against Wisconsin, coming up here soon. New Year's Day is when that game will be taking place. And right now they have us as co-OCs with Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton, our current QB and wide receiver coaches, respectively. So they'll get play calling duties there. So we know what it looks like in the immediate future, but we don't know what it looks like as far as when the hiring process starts and what we'll see come next season with the LSU Tigers. So what we're going to do today is we're going to cover potential candidates who we think we could take the job, who we think should take the job, and maybe some out-the-box candidates who people might not be looking at. Good one. So if you don't mind, I'll start us off and then we can, just keep the conversation going. So the first guy I want to look at, or an honorable mention, I guess you could say, a guy who I don't think would necessarily fit the job or want to take the job, but I think is somebody you have to mention when this job comes open, is Joe Brady, current offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills after Ken Dorsey was cut earlier in the season. Joe Brady was here for that beautiful 2019 run that we had where we went undefeated, won the national championship. Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. What a wonderful offense that was, and Joe Brady was one of the masterminds behind it. So it's a guy you have to mention when this job becomes open. However, I don't necessarily think it's somebody who's going to take the job because of his lack of acumen with recruiting, not necessarily wanting to be on the college level, as well as him having an NFL job at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rare to see someone who is succeeding at the next level come back down to the collegiate level. I mean, of course, built one of, if not the best offense in college football history. Of course, we'd want him back. But, like you said, he's already made his case in the NFL, and I think he's just going to continue to do that on that level. I don't see him stepping back down. Though I would love it. I'm sure a lot of people would.
I'm sure a lot of people around Baton Rouge would be a big fan if Joe Brady were back in the purple and gold. Of course, we don't know if that's going to happen, but it's something we have to mention. Of my 5 potential candidates, I wrote down a list of 5 who I think would work well and may actually happen. My first, I have Chip Lindsay, UNC offensive coordinator at the moment, has had some time with Drake May, who I think, physically and gameplay-wise kind of fits what Nuss can do as well. So that would make sense going into next season. UNC, had a really good year on offense. They finished, I believe, 6th in offensive yards per game, as well as top 15 in yards per play. So they're definitely gaining yards while Chip Lindsay is calling the plays. He's had that time with Drake May. He's also been at other schools like Southern Miss, Arizona State, UCF, while they've had some success on offense as well. So he's got some acumen, and I really like what Chip Lindsay could bring to the table as far as what he's done in the past and what he could do with the personnel we currently have.
Going off of what you said about how UNC finished offensively this season, it was already in any year. That is a great stat to have. But I think especially this year with how explosive a lot of these offenses have been this year, having the 6th and the 15th in those 2 categories is mind-blowing, especially from coming from UNC.
And building on explosive offense, a guy who had arguably the most explosive offense in college football this year was Will Stein with Oregon, offensive coordinator at Oregon. This was his first year under head coach Dan Lanning. Like I said, Oregon, 2nd in points per game, 1st in total points in college football this year. So that offense was working. They had a Heisman finalist and Bo Nix, a guy who, again, kind of looks like Drake May and kind of looks like Nuss. They're bigger quarterbacks, strong arms, can make any throw in the field, semi-athletic, have the ability to make the ball with their legs. It's just, can they make that decision?
I think anybody that can make Bo Nix a Heisman finalist is pretty good at his job.
Yeah, and Will Stein did that. Will Stein had a great year at Oregon. Young mind. The real question there is, can BK lure him away from Oregon? It depends on money. It depends on resources, and it depends on the recruiting. If BK can lure away a guy like Will Stein, who's a young mind, who's working really well in the Pac-12, the disbanding Pac-12 at the moment, to come down to the SEC and work an SEC offense with a complete personnel change, he could do some really exciting things reminiscent of that 2019 team.
Normally I would say it would be pretty hard to take a guy from a program like this who just had so much success. But considering the state of the Pac-12 going into next year, how much change there will be, it wouldn't surprise me if someone like this would leave.
Speaking about the Pac-12, my next guy was Andy Ludwig, Utah offensive coordinator. And he's had talent. He's coached talent. He's played talent. I mean, Brian Johnson, who's the offensive coordinator of the Eagles, who's getting looks as an NFL head coach, he coached him. I mean, he's coached Cam Rising, who's been a very fantastic player for Utah, although been hurt this year. He was at Vandy before. He was an OC/quarterback/wide receiver coach at Vandy from 2015 to 2018. So he's been in the SEC. He was also at Utah in a previous stint in 05 to 08, where, he took that team to an undefeated Sugar Bowl as the offensive coordinator. So he knows what it takes to make some offense. Utah has had a great offense statistically over the past 3 years when he's been the OC. So I know he has the talent. He's a little bit older than a guy like Will Stein or a guy I'll talk about in a minute, but I think he has that kind of same offensive mastermind that Mike Denbrock had and kind of fits the same system. So I think it'd be a natural fit here at LSU.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's older, 59, but that's not really a bad thing when you're talking about personnel like this. You want the experience, you want, the know. Shout out. But he's older. He's got plenty of experience, especially, 2 stints at Utah. And like you mentioned, 05 to 08, where he brought them to that undefeated Sugar Bowl. He did beat Alabama. You know how much we love to beat Alabama.
Anybody who beats Alabama is on my list. That's for sure.
So I also had him as a person to look for in this potential candidate that I think would not only make me happy, but make themselves happy.
Yeah, absolutely. My fourth guy here is Kirby Moore. I tweeted about him. This is a guy who I think is absolutely fantastic. He's the Mizzou offensive coordinator. Although he just got an extension recently, I'm sure that extension doesn't come with LSU money. So, it's not impossible to lure away a guy who just signed a contract. But Mizzou had a great offense this year. They were one of the best in the SEC. I think the offense was a big reason that they turned around the entire Mizzou program, going from a middling SEC team to even lower SEC team to now somebody who was in the top 10 for a majority of the season. So, could he go from Tigers to Tigers in the SEC? Don't know. He had a lot of talent at Mizzou. He'll get a lot of talent at LSU. So we'll see if, maybe Brian Kelly can lure him away from another SEC school. But he did a lot of good things for Mizzou this year, which I think he could build on at a bigger school.
And that's another big point to me is like you're looking at these coaches that they've already acquired success. They've built these programs. You've seen them, time in, time out, succeed, do what he wants them to do. And that's with teams that don't have the recruiting that LSU has. They don't have the talent. They don't have the money that LSU has, the backing that LSU has. It's just a whole bigger picture when you come to Death Valley, when you come to Baton Rouge, that I think an already successful coach takes it to the next level.
And I think before I mention my last guy who I have on my list, some honorable mentions, and you can give some as well. Tommy Rees was with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, a guy who a lot of people are going to talk about. However, he's at Bama right now. He's doing good things over there. I think it would take a lot to lure him away, and not necessarily something we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, especially with he's in the playoffs right now, and Bama's looking good.
Yeah. Is there anybody else you wanted to mention before I get to my last guy?
Yeah, there was me and you had a lot of the same guys, like we typically do.
Yep.
Great minds think alike.
That's what
but
they
I
say.
had, one extra one, and he's a familiar name, within the LSU family. He's been there before, but he was under Les Miles as an offensive line coach and the run game coordinator, and that's Jeff Grimes. He's another one who's up there in age at 55, but when you look at some of the talent and some of the teams he's been with at LSU, he's made guys go pro like Will Clapp, Lyle Collins, just to name a few. And then not only that, but he also went to BYU where he was the OC, and he made Zach Wilson a Heisman finalist.
And like you said with Bo Nix,
same thing with
if
Bo
someone
Nix
can make him look like a Heisman finalist, we need him in the building. So, yeah, I mean, Jeff Grimes, familiar name to LSU. And we know Brian Kelly isn't opposed to bringing those back. He brought back a 80-year-old defensive line coach who came back in and was screaming on the sidelines. So Brian Kelly knows that LSU is a local community who loves their Tigers, so he wouldn't be opposed to that. And speaking about local, my last candidate is Joe Sloan himself.
Yeah.
I think for me, he's probably my favorite for the job, not only because he's already here and has an understanding of our offense, but there's a reason Jaden Daniels mentioned him specifically in his Heisman speech. There's a reason recruits mention him when they talk about LSU on social media. Joe Sloan is a great recruiter, and Joe Sloan is a great personal person. And I think that takes a lot in the quarterback room as well as on the offense. Joe Sloan, our current quarterbacks coach, like I said, he will be the co-OC with Cortez Hankton for the ReliaQuest Bowl. And in my opinion, that's kind of like his first interview. Like if he can show himself to lead the offense from the coordinator position in the bowl game, I think that's already a step in the right direction. Brian Kelly has already mentioned him as well as Cortez as two guys who are getting strong pushes for that position before they even open it up from outside perspectives. So we know that Joe Sloan is a favorite in the building. We know that Joe Sloan is a young offensive mind who can push recruits to come here and bring in talent as well as make it work on the field. So he's definitely my favorite right now. I'm really excited to see if he can make that offense against Wisconsin work on January 1st. And if he can, I think that'll solidify himself as a top candidate for LSU's vacant OC.
Yeah, I agree. I always like to stay in-house when you can, especially when you know you've had success with this guy. Even though he wasn't at the helm per se of the offense, I think he had a big role in it being as successful as it was. You know, like you said, this is like his first interview, and I am expecting a huge game out of this offense against a rather weak defense from a weaker conference. All I'm saying.
Make sure to tune in to other Eye on the Tigers episodes to see a bowl preview, as well as tune into Everything the Know. You can see it here at Be in the Know on social media or theknow.com to read some wonderful articles, not only about our Tigers, but about all Louisiana sports and sports in general. Thank you for watching Eye on the Tigers. I am Bryce.
And I am Byron.
And you have been watching Eye on the Tigers with the Off the Dome boys.